Hi, my name's Zoe Thacker, and I'm finishing off the final units for Unit 205 and Unit 224 and Unit 225. So these are the units that I've had sent back to me for my last final ones. So as you can see, I'm going off my laptop here. I've already written them all out, and I'm kind of just going to expand as we go along. So the first one, the feedback I got was that some of the units need redoing. And then I've got my elements here, 1.4 all the way from A to F, and 4.2 all the way from A to D. It needs to be redone within better explanations. So to start off with, we've got 4.1A, describe the different animal accommodation needs in respect to, and then I've got all the different points. So the first one is ventilation. Obviously, ventilation is access to fresh air for a building. Passive being air coming through naturally, such as a door or a window, and active being air coming through forcefully, so air conditioning unit or anything like that. So it's important. So if your animal's getting cold, obviously you'd shut a window, turn the aircon off or something like that. Or if the animal's obviously ill, you'd try and allow the air to get through to get some fresh air in. Obviously not too much fresh air, because then you could pass the illness. If it's like a kennel cough, you could pass it on to other animals. So animals like horses, for example, they're sometimes outside, so they're used to the fresh air, they're used to the all weather types. But it obviously depends on what animal there is. Also, if there's not enough ventilation, if the window's shut or something, it could get too hot, especially in the summer. Especially for animals such as like guinea pigs and rabbits, they can overheat. So a little fan coming through would obviously helps that be active ventilation. Stop them overheating too quickly. 4.1b, which would be light. Light's obviously a natural source. So natural is obviously this. So the sunlight coming through. Obviously artificial light being bulbs, UV lights for like lizards and stuff like that. Also you can get like UVB ones, I think it's UVA as well, so when it does the heat lamp and the red lamp at the same time. Obviously an example of that being, again, lizards. Animals such as guinea pigs and stuff don't necessarily need that much light, but obviously they need time clockwise sleep. So if they're sleeping in dark and they're awake in the dark, it's not really going to be quite normal for them. So obviously you've got to try and get that right for them, because obviously we're awake in the daylight and sleep at night, so they're similar to us. So the next one is structure and fittings. So obviously being bolts, hinges, can't really think of much else you could have for doors, like the kennels. So obviously the corner shafts and stuff, handlebars. So obviously making sure that it's not too sharp. So especially like say in the kennels, when a dog jumps up, the handlebar obviously has to be on the outside, so the dog can't learn to lift it up. But it also needs to be, it can't be sharp, one for us and two for them. The bolts and hinges all need to be rounded off, so it's not sharp for them, so if they are to chew for it or to scratch themselves, they don't hurt themselves and don't injure themselves. They also need to be possibly like a cap put on them, so that they're out of sight and out of way. Also, it stops the infection, so if a dog has got, say, faeces over its paws and it jumps up in the bolts and we don't clean it properly, it's just a little nest of infection and disease, and it can be spread from dog to dog. Next one being temperature. So temperature of a room or area that the animal's in, even the temperature such as like weather conditions, etc. So such as chinchillas overheat very quickly, and they should really be kept outside because of their fur type. However, if you're obviously going to keep them inside, it's important to keep the room very cool. They will get stressed and they will like lose their fur gradually, and they'll get ill. Therefore, like, obviously temperature for the accommodation is very important. Obviously temperature for such as animals such as dogs is important. Cats not so much, because cats can adapt to many things, but they're usually you get indoor cats and outdoor cats, so it's completely up to what type of cat you've got, and what they've kind of been used to. But generally they're used to the outdoors and they'll keep themselves warm. So obviously temperature is very important in that sort of terms. An animal can get very ill, and if they're an animal such as a dog is shown to be panting, it's obviously a sign they're either overheating, too hot, or they're too thirsty. And if you've got enough water there and they're still panting, then they're just overheating. Next one would be noise. So a sound that is made by something usually rather loud, or that can be caused as a disturbance to somebody or something. So the noise of the environment. So if you've got a very scared pony in the stables and you've got builders next door, it's not going to be good for the pony, because the pony's going to get stressed. It's going to have like anxiety issues, and it's probably going to start showing aggression towards its owners, who's trying to help it but doesn't realise it's trying to help it. Some animals such as dagoos, they've got very sensitive ears. So putting them in a living room is not ideal at all. They should go in a very quiet room, because if you've got them in the living room with a surround sound system going and you're listening to a big adventure film and it all kicks off with the fight scene, etc., then it stresses out the dago. Their ears are so big and sensitive that it will just make them ill, and it won't be good for them at all. So obviously animals such as dagoos, it's important they go in a dark, quiet room to be themselves. Obviously sighting, the location of the accommodation or site of something. So if you've got, say, chickens in your garden and you've got the wind blowing this direction, you're not necessarily going to put the rabbits or the chickens facing towards the wind. You're going to put them to the sides. They've still got access and the wind's still going to come round, but they're not full front facing the wind, going to get cold, and if it rains, the rain's going to go straight in. It's going to be too breezy for them, basically. So you need to kind of put them in a way where they've got a bit of fresh air and ventilation coming through, but they've not got too much that they're going to get absolutely soaking wet if it rains, and not going to get too cold. So obviously the site is very important. Also with chickens, obviously they eat the patch that they eat away at the patch that they're on. So it's important to move them around so that they've got a fresh section and a clean section, and you can clean that, grow that grass back, put them in another section. So obviously that's very important as well. Next bit is 4.2a, which is state the different animals' accommodation needs in relation to animal health and welfare, covering the suitability of the animals concerned. So, for example, being aggression, wealth, breed, age, and stuff like that. So, so the suitability of the animal concerned. So, first off, what's the behaviour, the temperament of the animal? Is the horse aggressive? Is it very passive? Does it mind being walked around? Does it mind not being walked around? Need to know them sorts of stuff. Obviously, the wealth of it. Has he got a sore foot? Has he got a sore hind limb? All them sorts of stuff. Otherwise, if you go around bottling and broken and it's not very good and not very well, then it's obviously going to kick out for them sort of reasons. Another being different types of animals, such as the breed. So the breed, so for animals such as dogs, obviously, and cats as well, it's important to know the breed of the animal for the type of accommodation, because you're not going to have a small accommodation and put a Great Dane in it or a Newfoundland. You're obviously going to get a big kennel for a big dog and a big breed, and have space for it to move and to sort of have freedom as such. Also, the age of the animal is kind of important, because if you've got an old dog, a very old dog, and you've got a puppy, one, you're not going to really generally put them in together, unless they're partners together in life. But you're not really going to put a puppy in a small pen and an old dog in a big pen, because the puppy needs space to move around, it gets some energy out. The older dog in general, will just kind of stay in the pen, inside, outside, bed, whereas the puppy is going to explore that a little bit more. Next part is allowing the necessary freedom of movement. So obviously space, it needs enough space. So again, you wouldn't put a Newfoundland in a small kennel, you'd put them in a big kennel. Also height restriction, some dogs jump, a lot of dogs jump. So some need a it's like a kennel on top of the cage, so it just stops the dog from, if you've got a jumper, it stops them from jumping over to the next kennel or jumping out and escaping. Obviously that is very important to know if the dog's coming in to jumper or not, and it's very important to monitor that as well. Also, because the higher they jump, the more of a fall they've got, especially with dogs and with cats as well. The height, like, they've got more of a fall, which means they've got more of a chance of injuring themselves and hurting their feet, etc. So yeah, so height restriction is also important, but most important is allowing space. So giving, say, a horse enough space and freedom of movement, to putting them out in a field and a paddock and giving them that space to roam around and be free, not feel like they're stopped or they're not allowed to go in many places or not allowed to explore very far, because that's just going to stress the animal out, and then obviously health deteriorates from there. Next one is minimising animal stress. So again, noise around. If you've got builders in, like at the college we had some builders in, but it was important that they try to keep the noise down as much as possible, because animals do get stressed with some noise, especially animals such as dagoos and guinea pigs and hamsters and stuff like that. Some smaller animals, obviously larger animals such as dogs also, when it's fireworks night, dogs, horses and cats freak out quite a bit actually, and it's important that you de-stress them as much as possible, because it can make them really ill. They go off their food, they can go off their water, they can start molting, and it's a vicious cycle really. Also, if it's, say you're in a kennel and it's too noisy in the kennel, a dog's not going to settle. Some dogs panter up and down, dribble and wee and sit in their poo and stress themselves out even more because of the mess they're in, and don't quite realise that it's all okay as such. So it's important to obviously keep an eye on them. Obviously, age of a dog is important. So an older dog is probably going to get a bit more stressed than what a younger dog would, sometimes. However, if it's like a puppy, they can go off their food if they're not in a nice environment they don't recognise. If they're not in a home, they've been put in a kennel, they'll go off their food, they could go off their water. So again, that's all signs of stress. They're obviously very variable compared to what animal you're talking about and what breed of dog and age of dog. So yeah. Next one being the intended purpose and length of stay in the accommodation. So obviously again with the kennels we have a boarding block and a rehoming block. Some of the dogs that are boarding, we need to know how long they're staying for. So we've got an Akita at the moment, he's been there for a couple of months boarding, and it's important to obviously get him out of the kennel every day. One, because he's an Akita and he needs the exercise, and two, because he's been in the kennels for so long that he's gone a bit kennel crazy. So it's important to note that. The reason as to why they're in the kennel. So our ones, their owners have gone on holiday, or some of them they've been mistreated and neglected and left on the streets, so they're in for rehoming. So they're waiting to be rehomed and go out to a new home. So it's important to have a rough idea of how long you think the dog will be in there for. Also for animals such as like guinea pigs and stuff like that, keeping them in a little pen when you're just cleaning their cage out and their area out is absolutely fine for you to be to clean their cage out, but you need to move them over straight away, because keeping them in that pen for any longer than an hour or two, it's just going to stress them out big time, and it's going to be a change of environment. They're not going to be used to it, so you need to try and put them back as quickly as possible and try and get them back to normal again. So obviously for animals such as small animals such as hedgehogs, guinea pigs, hamsters, rabbits and that sort of stuff, it's important that you do, for the purpose of their accommodation changing, you put them back straight away so they can adapt quicker to their newer environment. Or if you are going to change them over, put all their scents and smells over with them and make it similar to their previous environment.